Nick, my understanding is that Mike McCarthy spoke today. What was the most important thing or two he said?
Well, I think the most important thing was no Max Ihanachor. And I think that's a real bummer for him. You know, you think about Ihanachor and how he's trying to make up ground in this battle with Dylan Cook. And I just think he has to be out there for most of these preseason games. I think it's very, very easy to say now that 60 is the favorite to start week one against the Atlanta Falcons. So that's one thing. And the second thing I thought he mentioned was his team is pretty sloppy right now. There's a lot of pre-snap penalties, a lot of miscommunications. Mostly offensively, they look sloppy. I think defensively, they've actually looked pretty good. But, offensively, a lot of false starts, illegal formations, a lot of these weird penalties that have just kind of killed them with procedural penalties. And Mike McCarthy even admitted that they're getting more procedural penalties and miscommunications than most teams he's coached before at this point in the year. So they're far behind. They're putting in a huge bucket and swath of information into what they've done over the past 2 months. But it's been sloppy so far, especially on the offensive side of the football.
So no IMAX on Thursday against the Packers. Did McCarthy address what the QB rotation will be?
It seems like they're going to decide that after today. I don't expect them to kind of come out and say it until later tonight. But here's the thing. He said they're going to split them into 3 groups. There's an implication there, if you're going to split them into 3 groups, that it's probably going to be Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, and Drew Allar, and Aaron Rodgers won't play. That is, I think, one thing you can read into. But he didn't outright say it because he hasn't decided yet. The other idea I guess they could do is play Rodgers and sit Mason Rudolph. I think that, I guess, could happen. But I think the more likely idea is we see Mason, we see Will, and we see Drew, and Aaron Rodgers doesn't end up playing despite all the talk of that last week.
Why do you think that? Because, that talk last week really stood out when Rodgers said McCarthy wants him to play.
I think that they're really banged up right now with Pittman and Metcalf hurt. That is, I think, one thing. What does he really gain, I guess, by playing with Brandon Smith? I don't know if they're gaining a ton by doing that. So that's one thing I think that could be a consideration. So they might just roll him out there against the Jets and the Bills. I think that might be something they do just because of the injuries they have at wide receiver. They might want to see the full first-team unit together once everyone's healthy. And I don't get the fact that Pittman and Metcalf are seriously injured or anything, but I don't think they're going to play on Thursday. So you would be playing Rodgers with Roman Wilson and Jeremy Bernard. Now, there are benefits to that, but I wouldn't be surprised if McCarthy wants to see his first-team weapons out there with Rodgers. So that's one thing I think that sticks out right away. Listen, could they still play Aaron Rodgers and end up playing him like one drive and splitting his reps with Mason Rudolph's reps to still give Will Howard and Drew Allar the lion's share of this game? Sure, they could do that. But when you're saying you're splitting it into 3 groups, I think the implication is pretty clear that, right now, I guess the tentative plan is Aaron Rodgers not playing.
What are the details on the Pittman and Metcalf injuries? Can you update us? Did he update us?
So Pittman has something going on with his right leg. He got examined at Saturday Night Lights. I don't think it's serious. I think it's something soft tissue. So I don't think it's something too serious. I think he'll be back next week and might even play in that Jets game. With Metcalf, he made a kind of sprawling catch down the sideline, that spectacular one-handed catch. You might have seen a video of it. I'm sure someone got a video of it. He went down and hit his shoulder pretty hard. Looks like there's some type of minor arm injury. Again, I don't think either of those are serious, but this is the preseason. If the guys don't have to practice and they're banged up, let them recover. So just not expecting those guys to play. We didn't hear anything explicitly from Mike McCarthy today, except he kind of, was talking about how Jeremy Bernard's going to have a bigger opportunity to step up into bigger reps, more reps. And I think that just kind of tells you where Metcalf and Pittman are right now, and they're probably not going to play.
So just to be clear then, your best guess right now, and McCarthy may not address this till tomorrow anyway, for the quarterback rotation would be what? Who starts and how is it divvied up? Just your best guess.
Yeah, so my guess right now is Rudolph, then Howard, then Allar. What I think is going to happen is Allar's going to get basically most, if not all, of the second half. I think he needs a lot of playing time. So I think they're going to get him a lot. I think they're going to give Rudolph or Rodgers, I guess, if they want to throw a curveball here, 1 or 2 drives to start the game. I think you know what those 2 guys are. and you kind of look at that and say, okay, Rudolph gets 2 drives, and then that's about all he gets. He's not going to get a ton of playing time. And then whoever after that is, I think, will be Will Howard. Will Howard will essentially get the entire second quarter. So
okay.
my guess is what you're going to end up seeing is 1 or 2 drives from the first team, whether that's Rodgers or Rudolph. Then Howard gets, that whole second quarter, maybe part of the first quarter, and then basically the entire second half goes to Drew Allar. That's what I think is going to happen.
All right. So, and we're talking to Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. That's where you can read his stuff. Here's what I'm reading into this whole thing as we get ready for the games to play. It feels to me like this is more important for Will Howard at this point than anybody, and I'll tell you why. It doesn't feel to me like Howard is blowing anybody away with his camp so far. I get the gist that he's been fine, he's been okay, but my overall impression is that Rudolph has really made an impression on Mike McCarthy and that he's going to be the backup this year. And that Allar is clearly establishing himself as what we thought he was, which is the better prospect, the more higher ceiling guy than Howard. And I wonder, quite frankly, where all of this leaves Will Howard. You?
Yeah, I think, listen, Mason has had a really boring camp. And I mean that in like the best way possible. It's just been a lot of dink and dunk, get the ball to where it needs to go, manage the game. Nothing sexy, nothing too flashy. He hasn't had a high-level throw. He really hasn't had a lot of lowlights. And so that's been all he's needed to do. Mason Rudolph just needed to not completely self-destruct, and he has not done that in any respect. Howard has had a training camp, I think, where he has been this kind of give or take. He's had some really great reps where I think he layers throws in the seam and outside the numbers, and you see the changeup and the accuracy, and it just shines. And so you're excited by that, but the arm clearly isn't the same as the other 3. He's put the ball in harm's way too often. And so I think you look at Will Howard, and it's just like, you'll want more consistency from this guy. He's young. He's clearly got some potential. I think the accuracy stands out. Every time they do those drills and individual drills where it's, accuracy related, he shines in them. He hits the buckets. He does everything he needs to do. He's a very accurate quarterback. But I also am a little concerned about how he handles pressure and how he really reads pre-snap to post-snap, because I think that's been part of what has led to some turnovers in some of these practices. So I think the live game reps mean everything to him. If he comes out in the preseason and lights it up, I think we're having a tougher discussion. Maybe that's when the whole quarterback discussion really becomes serious. But right now, I think it's hard to not have your projection be Mason Rudolph QB2. It just is what it is. I do think Howard has put together 2 or so nice practices back-to-back. I think he was solid on Saturday at Saturday Night Lights, had a few really nice throws up the seam. And I thought yesterday he put together a really solid hour that we saw out here in Latrobe, where he was making some throws, especially in the play-action game. But we'll really see where everything goes. I'm still skeptical. I think he has some ground to make up.
Yeah, I guess maybe a shorter way for me to say my opinion right now is Will Howard really needed to stand out. He still might, but he needed to stand out, and he has not so far. And if somebody goes, it's going to be him. Yes or no?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair take right now. I really do. And again, it could change. We've talked about that. But right now, he hasn't been like the clear second-best quarterback at camp. In fact, there are days when Allar outplays him. And I just think that is, I said last week, the gap between Rudolph and Howard is bigger than the gap between Howard and Allar. And that was absolutely true. I think over the last 3 or 4 days, he's done a nice job to start to close the gap between him and Rudolph. Rudolph didn't really have a great day Saturday. I thought Howard had a nice day. But I do think that Howard needs to take a significant leap over the next 2 weeks. And these preseason games mean everything to him. If he can have a preseason similar to like what Skylar Thompson had last year, we can start talking about cooking with grease, because that's the type of performance he needs to force his team to either keep 4, make a tough decision to trade Mason Rudolph, something of the sort.
So the better bet for you right now is which? they keep 4 quarterbacks, or Howard is either cut or an attempt is made to sneak him to the practice squad and through waivers. 4 quarterbacks or Howard is at high risk.
I personally have held the belief they're going to keep 3, and so I'm going with the Howard and high risk mottos here. He needs to do something to give them peril about cutting him. Right now, if they cut him, I would personally, in my opinion of what I've watched, I wouldn't be like, oh, if he gets away, they're just missing the next franchise quarterback. He doesn't look like a franchise quarterback. He could be a good backup. You know, I was talking with Alan Saunders about this, and I think the best analogy is this. Will Howard's the mystery box. He could be anything. He could even be Mason Rudolph. And I just think that is kind of perfect to describe this. And the fact that he has not looked like Mason Rudolph. He's looked more like second-year Mason Rudolph, which was not a good quarterback. 10th-year Mason Rudolph is a much different and crisp quarterback. And I think Howard can be a backup in the National Football League. I'm just not sure that he has done enough to justify taking up a roster spot from someone else. And so right now I'm thinking they keep 3 and he's at high risk.
Limits, would you like to jump in and perhaps ask a Drew Allar related question?
I would love to, Joe. And then I actually have a running back question after that, if you would allow.
Please.
So, Nick, I saw a lot of clips when I was away of Allar at Saturday night practice and some of the balls that he was delivering. How have you seen Allar grow and develop from the first day at camp to where we are now before the first preseason game?
His footwork looks better. He looks more in rhythm. I think that has been one thing that has stuck out. Drew is such a frustrating quarterback because there are such high-level throws that he makes out there, and you just see the ball jump out of his hand. It's just different. I mean, he's got an absolute cannon in an arm, and he makes these really high-level, tight-window throws where you are just like, wow, this guy has sky-high ceiling. But then you watch him skip a 5-yard pass. You watch him overthrow a 10-yard in by 10 yards. It's not even close. He's made a lot of strides in the deep ball. I think the deep ball has looked way better lately than it did to start camp. But the big thing is, man, he's got to make his layups. He's not making his layups. And that's where that's the biggest growth point for Drew Allar. He has to start hitting a 5-yard curl with consistency on time. He has to start hitting the 10-yard deep out with consistency. The short to intermediate accuracy is a real big problem for him right now. And so I think he's had this volatile camp where you see the clips of wow, and then if you saw other clips, you'd see him starting a 5-yard pass, throwing a 10-yard in, nowhere near the guy. And it's just a frustrating football player to watch because you can see the potential oozing there. But this has been the story of Drew Allar. The layups aren't layups with him, and they need to be.
Do you think that's more mechanical or mental?
Mechanical. I think he's got some things to work on. I think the footwork's in tempo. I think the base is still too wide. I think his lower half's not engaged enough, so he's throwing a lot with all arm instead of driving the ball through his lower half and torquing through his core. He's not doing that enough. And so he's got a great arm, so you'll see the arm just pop. But if you want to really get accuracy, the whole lower half has to follow the upper body. And so that's why you see him spray so many balls, is because the lower half doesn't match his upper half well enough. I also think sometimes, the mental side of things, I think he's been sped up recently. I think he's more in tune with what's going on and how he can read out coverages and how he can read out everything. But I think the biggest problem I have with Allar is, how does he end up pressure? Sometimes he ducks his head in the face of pressure and wraps his eyes and these things. He has playmaking ability, but he doesn't always go to that first. And so I have some questions about Allar, but I do think the mechanics still have work to do. If they can tighten those up, you can see it. But this was never a 3-month project. This was always 2 years or more before Allar could really truly say, "Oh, the mechanics are fixed." If you want to fix mechanics, man, you got to put in like 10,000 reps. You're not getting that done in one summer.